My husband went to my boss's house. So we ignored him and let the Ring camera speak. On Labor Day, my 8-year-old said, "Mom, Dad's car is in Miss Rivera's driveway." He said it like he was reading a sign. Calm. Factuel. But his face wasn't calm. His eyebrows pinched together like his brain was trying to solve a problem that didn't make sense. I didn't shout. I didn't grab my keys. I didn't call my husband screaming. I made one small change. I opened a note on my phone titled Incident Log, and I typed my son's sentence word for word. Because in that moment, I realized something. My husband wasn't just jealous. He was escalating. My name is Natalie. I'm 35. I live outside Raleigh, North Carolina, in a neighborhood where every driveway has chalk drawings and at least one doorbell camera. My husband, Greg, is 36. We've been married 10 years. Our son is Liam. He's 8, observant, and he notices adult tension the way some kids notice thunderstorms. And Miss Rivera, that's my boss. Her real name in this story is Marisol Rivera. She's 44. She runs our department with calm focus, like she refuses to let chaos become culture. I had been at my new job for 6 months. New job, meaning new confidence, new routines, new respect. And Greg didn't like the change. Not because he hated me succeeding, because he hated me succeeding without needing him. Here's what I should have noticed earlier. A controlling person doesn't start with control. They start with concern. It began with little comments. You're working late again. You're always on your laptop. Who's texting you? At first, I answered like a normal spouse. Client stuff. Deadlines. Group chat. Then it turned into little rules. Don't take calls in the bedroom. Let me see the schedule. Text me when you leave. And because we were married and because I wanted peace, I tried to meet him halfway. But halfway kept moving. Then Marisol offered me a promotion track. Not a guaranteed promotion. A real path. More responsibility. More training. I was proud. Greg smiled when I told him, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. He said, "So you'll be even busier." And I remember thinking, that's not what you say when you're happy for your wife. That's what you say when you're calculating your loss of control. 2 weeks before Labor Day, Marisol asked me to join a Sunday afternoon prep session for a Monday presentation. Nothing shady. Just a Zoom call. Greg heard Sunday meeting and his whole body changed. He said, "On a Sunday, with your boss?" I said, "Yes." Greg laughed, sharp. "Your boss is a woman," he said, "but that doesn't make it automatically innocent." That was the first time he implied I was unfaithful. Not directly. Just enough to poison the air. I should have set a hard boundary right then. Instead, I did the old Natalie thing. I tried to reassure him. I said, "Greg, you're making up a story." He replied, "I'm not making up anything. I'm noticing." Noticing. He used my own word against me. Then came Labor Day weekend. Marisol lives about 7 minutes from us. Same school district. Same grocery store. That Monday morning, I was home because the office was closed, but I had planned to prep for a Tuesday meeting. Greg said he was running out for coffee. Liam was in the living room building a Lego set on the floor. I was in the kitchen making a grocery list when Liam looked out the window and said his sentence. "Mom, Dad's car is in Miss Rivera's driveway." My stomach dropped. I walked to the window slowly, like I could control what I was about to see if I moved carefully. And there it was. Greg's car, parked at the curb, right in front of Marisol's house. I felt cold all over. Not because I thought Greg was cheating, because I knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to drag my boss into our marriage, to embarrass me, to create a scene. And scenes are his specialty. Liam looked up at me and whispered, "Is Dad in trouble?" I forced my face soft. "No," I said. "You're okay, keep building." Then I texted Greg. Me, 9:18 a.m. Where are you? 3 dots. Then, Greg, 9:19 a.m. Handling something. Handling something. Like I was a problem to manage. I typed, me, 9:20 a.m. Do not go to my boss's house. He didn't reply. So I called Marisol. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. "Marisol," I said, "I'm so sorry. My husband is outside your home. I'm handling it." Marisol paused for half a second. Then she said, calm, "Thank you for telling me. I'm not opening the door." Not opening the door. Those words were a lifeline. Because it meant she understood the right move. Don't engage. Document. Protect your space. Marisol added, "I have a doorbell camera. It's recording." Recording. I opened Incident Log and typed, Labor Day 9:16 a.m. Liam saw Greg's car at Marisol's driveway. 9:20 a.m. Called Marisol. She will not open door. Camera recording. Then I did something else. I didn't drive there. I know that sounds weird. But I didn't want my son watching me race out in panic. And I didn't want to create a 3-person confrontation on a quiet street. Instead, I texted Greg again. Me, 9:24 a.m. Come home. Now. We will discuss this privately. A minute passed. Then Marisol texted me. Marisol, 9:25 a.m. He rang the bell, he's still there. My stomach twisted. Then another text. Marisol, 9:27 a.m. He is pacing and talking to the camera. Talking to the camera. Performing. My husband was performing for an audience he imagined. And I knew, whatever he was saying, it was going to live as a receipt. That was terrifying, and also useful. Then my phone buzzed again. Text. 9:29 a.m. Greg. She won't answer. That tells me everything. That tells me everything. Like silence was proof of guilt. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. But I didn't cry. I did the next small change. I started a folder in my email. Subject. Receipts. I saved screenshots of every text. Then I waited. At 9:41 a.m., Greg texted again. Greg. Tell your boss I'm not leaving until she admits what's going on. Admits what? Nothing was going on. Except him. At 9:56 a.m., Marisol texted one last line. Marisol, he just left. I have video. We'll address this through HR if necessary. Ere. My stomach dropped. Because now my marriage problem had touched my career. And that's when I realized the truth. Greg didn't just cross a line. He crossed the one line that changes everything. He endangered my livelihood. And if he could do that once, he could do it again. Greg came home at 10:12 a.m. like nothing happened. He walked in carrying a coffee, calm face, casual posture. Like he hadn't just shown up at my boss's house on a holiday morning. Liam ran up. Dad, he said, why were you at Miss Rivera's house? Greg froze for half a second. Then he smiled and said, I was dropping something off. Dropping something off. A lie that sounded like a lesson. Because kids don't challenge adults well. They just absorb. I stepped between them gently. Liam, I said, go grab your sneakers. We're going to the park. Liam hesitated. Then he left. And the second he was out of earshot, I looked at Greg and kept my voice low. What did you do? I asked. Greg shrugged like I was overreacting. I asked a question, he said. She refused to answer. That's suspicious. Suspicious. He said it like it was logical. I stared at him. You went to my boss's home, I said. You put my job at risk. Greg scoffed. If your job is at risk, maybe it's because you're doing something you shouldn't, he snapped. And there it was. The core problem. He wasn't sorry. He was justified. I felt my hands shake. So I did what I've learned to do when I'm about to lose control of my voice. I stopped talking. And I wrote, Incident log. His exact words. Because one day, I had a feeling I'd need to remember them. Greg took a sip of coffee and said, calm, I'm not letting you make me the bad guy. That sentence is manipulation. It's a way to force you to defend instead of address what happened. So I didn't defend. I said, you are leaving the house for a few days. Greg laughed. Not happening, he said. I nodded once. Then Liam and I will, I replied. Greg's eyes widened. Don't you dare, he hissed. I stayed calm. I dare, I said, because here's what I should have noticed earlier. The moment you enforce a boundary, controlling people show you who they really are. They don't negotiate. They escalate. Greg stepped closer, voice lower. You're going to embarrass me, he said. I looked at him. You embarrassed yourself, I said. Greg's jaw tightened. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down, then angled the screen away from me, fast. That one small motion told me he was already messaging someone. Maybe his brother. Maybe his mom. Someone who would be his audience. So I made another small change. He texted my sister, Jen. Me, 10:26 a.m. Can I bring Liam over for a few hours? I need calm. Jen replied immediately. Jen, yes, come. Then I texted Marisol. Me, 10:27 a.m. I'm so sorry again. Please tell me what you need from me. Marisol replied. Marisol, we'll handle this professionally. Do not engage him. Save everything. Save everything. I felt a wave of gratitude. Because she didn't shame me. She gave me a plan. At 10:45, I took Liam to the park like I promised. Greg stayed home. In the car, Liam asked, small voice, Are you mad at Dad? I kept it kid safe. I'm not mad at you, I said. Dad made an adult mistake. Liam stared at his hands. Is it because of Miss Rivera? He whispered. My throat tightened. No, I said gently. It's because Dad forgot boundaries. Liam nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Because kids can feel the adult truth in the air. That afternoon, while Liam played at my sister's house, I went back home to get a bag. Greg was pacing. He pointed at me and said, So you're running? I stayed calm. I'm taking space, I said. Greg's voice rose. Tell me the truth, he snapped. Are you having an affair? Affair. He said it loud, like he wanted the neighbors to hear. I didn't respond to the accusation. I responded to the behavior. If you say that again in front of Liam, I will take further steps, I said. Further steps. I didn't explain what. Because a boundary doesn't need a speech. Greg laughed like I was bluffing. Then he said, "Fine, if you won't tell me, I'll get the truth from her." From her? Meaning Marisol. I felt my stomach drop. "You already did," I said. "And you're not doing it again." Greg stepped toward me, then stopped, like he was deciding how far he could push. Then he said something that chilled me. "I know where she lives," he said. "And I know where you work." My chest tightened. Not because I thought he'd hurt anyone, because it was an intimidation line. A power line. I picked up my bag and walked out. And I didn't look back, because I didn't want him to see fear on my face. At my sister's, my phone buzzed. Email subject: HR meeting request. From our HR department. Requested by Marisol. For Tuesday morning, my stomach dropped. Because now the professional system was moving, which meant this wasn't marriage drama. This was workplace incident. And I realized something important. Ignoring him wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It was protecting my career from his chaos. That night, Greg texted me a long message. "Greg? 11:12 p.m. I'm sorry you feel embarrassed, but if you were transparent, I wouldn't have to do this." I stared at it. Sorry you feel embarrassed. Not sorry I went to your boss's house. I screenshot it, saved it, and added it to the folder. Then I wrote one line in incident log. Apology, that blames me. Because the next day, HR would ask me one question. Not do you love your husband? Not is he insecure? They would ask, is your workplace safe? And I needed to answer that with facts. Tuesday morning, I walked into HR with my stomach tight and my posture straight. I wore a simple blouse, hair pulled back, no dramatic makeup. Not because clothing fixes problems, because I wanted to look like what I was. A professional dealing with a personal crisis. Marisol was already in the room with HR, calm face, notebook open. HR representative, Miss Chen, greeted me and said, "We're going to keep this focused on workplace safety." Workplace safety. Those words made my throat tighten because I hated that we were here. Miss Chen said, "Marisol reported an incident at her home involving your spouse." I nodded. "Yes," I said. Miss Chen asked, "Has he contacted you about it?" I said, "Yes." Then I did something I'm proud of. I didn't tell a messy story. I gave a timeline. Labor Day, 9:16 a.m. My child saw him at her house. Texts: "I'm not leaving." Texts: "Admit what's going on." Post-incident blame shifting. I offered screenshots. Not as revenge. As documentation. Marisol added calmly. My camera recorded him. He spoke into it. He rang the bell multiple times. He did not enter the home. Miss Chen nodded. Then she asked the hardest question. "Do you believe he will show up at the office?" she said. My stomach dropped. Because I didn't want to believe it. But I had to be honest. "I don't know," I said, "but I know he thinks this is justified." Marisol nodded once. She said, "We're implementing a safety plan. Security has his photo. If he appears, we do not engage. We call building security and HR. Do not engage." That phrase again. It was becoming the theme of my week. Miss Chen asked if I wanted to file a formal workplace notice. I said yes. Not because I wanted to punish Greg. Because I wanted a record. A barrier between his impulse and my job. After the meeting, Marisol walked with me to the elevator. She said quietly, "I'm sorry this is happening to you." I swallowed. "Thank you for not making me feel like a mess," I said. Marisol nodded. "This isn't your mess," she said. "It's his behavior." That sentence made me breathe easier. Because for days, Greg had been trying to make me the cause. But the cause was simple. He couldn't tolerate not being in control. That afternoon, I picked up Liam and tried to make life normal. Homework. Snack. Cartoon. Then my phone buzzed. Text, 5:08 p.m. Greg, so HR talked to you. Nice. You really are trying to ruin me. My stomach went cold. Because how did he know? I hadn't told him. Which meant either he guessed or he had reached out to someone. I didn't reply. I added it to the folder. Then I got an email. Email subject, inquiry, employment verification. Sent to HR. Requester name. Greg's full name. My chest tightened. Because he had tried to contact my workplace directly. Not through me. Not through a conversation. Through HR. That's not concern. That's interference. That night, I sat on my sister's couch, Liam asleep in the guest room, and I finally let myself feel it. Humiliation. Fear. Enge. Then I did the calmest thing I could do with those emotions. I met with an attorney for a consult. Not to win a divorce. To understand options. The attorney listened and said something simple. Keep everything in writing, she said. And do not let him turn this into a he said, she said. She recommended a temporary separation agreement and a communication plan, especially with a child in the home. She also said, gently, if he escalates, document and consider a protective order. Protective order. That phrase sounded extreme. Until I remembered him saying, I know where she lives, I know where you work. So I made another small change. I stopped treating this as marriage conflict and started treating it as risk management. I texted Greg one clean message. Me, 9:17 p.m. You are not to contact Marisol or my workplace again. All communication goes through text. No yelling in front of Liam. If you violate this, I will take further steps. Greg replied instantly. Greg, you can't control me. I stared at that line. Because it wasn't about me controlling him. It was about him respecting boundaries. And if his response to a boundary was, you can't control me, it meant he still didn't understand. Or he did understand, and he didn't care. The next morning, Marisol forwarded me a message request. It was from Greg. Email subject, a man-to-man conversation. He had emailed her work email. My stomach dropped, because I had just told him not to. Marisol wrote one line above the forwarded email. Did not respond. HR has it. I felt my hands shake, because now I had a clear pattern. He couldn't tolerate being ignored. And controlling people hate being ignored more than they hate being wrong. I didn't respond to Greg emotionally. I responded structurally. I filed for a temporary separation through the attorney. Not final divorce. Temporary. With boundaries. Because Liam deserved calm now, not we'll see. When Greg was served the paperwork, he called me 12 times. 12. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Voicemail summary. You think you're so smart. You think ignoring me makes you right. I'll show up and make you listen. Make you listen. That line made my stomach go cold. Because now he'd said it out loud. And I knew what was coming next. He was going to show up somewhere public, where I couldn't ignore him quietly. And I was going to have to choose between my old instinct, appease, and my new one, protect. He showed up at the worst possible place. My kid's school. Not inside the building, but in the pickup line. Wednesday afternoon, I was parked in the car line, waiting, when I saw Greg's car behind me. My stomach dropped. Not because he wasn't allowed to pick up his kid. Because Liam wasn't even scheduled to be with Greg that day. And Greg wasn't on the pickup list without my confirmation. I could see him in my rearview mirror. Jaw tight, eyes locked forward, like he was rehearsing. My hands started to shake. So I did the one thing I've learned to do when panic rises. I got factual. I opened incident log and typed, school pickup, 3:11 p.m. Greg arrived unexpectedly. Then I called the front office. I kept my voice calm. Hi, I said. This is Liam's mom. My husband is in the pickup line unexpectedly. He is not scheduled. Please ensure Liam is released to me only. The office staff didn't sound surprised. They said, understood. That told me something I didn't like. This wasn't the first time they'd dealt with a parent boundary issue. Then I texted my sister. Me, Greg is at school. I'm okay. Stay on standby. Greg stayed in his car until the last minute. Then, as the kids walked out, he got out too. Not screaming. Not rushing. Just approaching. I held my posture steady. Liam saw him and his face lit up for half a second, then tightened when he felt the tension. Greg smiled at Liam like he was the hero. Buddy, he said, come here. Liam hesitated, looking at me. And that hesitation was the whole point. Kids shouldn't have to decide who's safe. I stepped forward and kept my voice calm. Greg, I said, not here. Greg's smile dropped. You can't keep him from me, he said loudly enough for a few parents to glance over. I didn't argue custody in a car line. I said one sentence. You are not on the pickup list today, I said. Leave. Greg laughed, sharp. This is your boss's fault, he snapped. She got in your head. My boss. In a school pickup line. That was the moment I realized Greg wasn't just jealous. He was obsessed with the story he'd built. And stories like that don't end quietly. The school staff stepped out then, and the presence of another adult changed the air. The staff member said, calm, sir, please return to your vehicle. Greg looked at her like she was beneath him. Then he looked at me and said, Lo, so you're really doing this? I didn't respond, because I could feel Liam's little body vibrating beside me. So I knelt down, eye level. Liam, I said softly. Go to Miss Harris and wait. Liam's eyes were watery. He nodded and walked away. Then I stood up and looked at Greg. Do not do this to him, I said quietly. Greg's eyes flashed. I'm doing this for him, he hissed. I'm protecting my family. Protecting. That word again. He used it like a shield. The staff member repeated, Sir, leave. Greg backed away, slow, like he wanted to make sure everyone saw him being forced. Then he got in his car and drove off. I picked Liam up from the office, signed him out, and got him into the car. The second the doors shut, he started crying. Not loud, just quiet, breathy sobs. I didn't do anything, he whispered. My throat tightened. I know, I said, you didn't. And that was the moment I stopped feeling conflicted. Because the line was clear now. Greg wasn't just hurting me. He was hurting our kid's sense of safety. That night, I filed for a protective order. Not permanent. Temporary. because he'd now shown up at my boss's house, attempted to contact my workplace, and appeared unexpectedly at school. The court clerk was matter of fact. She said, "Bring your documentation." Receipts. I had them. Text. Voicemail summaries. HR email. Marisol's Ring camera confirmation statement. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. But I also felt clear. Here's what I should have noticed earlier. When someone tries to force access, they don't want love. They want control. The temporary order was granted for distance and no workplace contact. It specified no contacting my employer, no contact with Marisol, and exchanges for Liam through a third party until a hearing. When Greg received it, he went quiet for 2 days. Then he did the most predictable thing. He went online. He posted vague quotes. "Some women destroy good men. Watch out for bosses who break families." And for a moment, my old shame flared. Because public smears are designed to make you crawl back and ask for peace. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. Because I knew where truth lived. In the folder. In the timestamps. In the systems that don't care about his performance. And then, the final twist came from the one place I didn't expect. Greg's mother. She called me. Her voice was small. "Natalie," she said, "I saw the order. What is happening?" I took a breath and said, calmly, "I've been trying to keep it private, but Greg went to my boss's house." Silence. Then she said, "He did what?" I explained briefly, factual. She went quiet. Then she whispered, "He told us you were having an affair." Affair. So he'd been recruiting a jury. I exhaled slowly. "No," I said. "He made a story, and he acted on it." Greg's mom whispered, "I'm sorry." And that apology mattered, because it was the first one that didn't come with blame. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. And I knew that day would decide the shape of the rest of our lives. Not because a court fixes marriages. Because it forces boundaries into reality. The hearing wasn't dramatic. It was fluorescent lights, paperwork, and a judge who looked like she'd seen this pattern too many times. Greg showed up in a button-down like he was going to a job interview. I showed up in simple clothes with a folder. Not a dramatic folder. A boring folder. Because boring truth wins. The judge asked why the protective order was requested. My attorney spoke first, calm. She listed the pattern. Uninvited visit to employer's home. Direct contact attempts with employer and HR. School pickup escalation. Voicemail. "I'll show up and make you listen." Then my attorney submitted the receipts. Text messages with timestamps. The HR meeting request. A written statement from Marisol about the doorbell footage. Greg tried to explain. He said he was protecting his marriage. The judge asked, "By going to your wife's supervisor's home." Greg hesitated. Then he said, "I needed answers." The judge's tone stayed calm. "You are not entitled to answers through harassment," she said. Harassment. That word landed. Because it named it. Greg's face tightened. Then he tried another tactic. He said, "She ignored me." Ignored me. Like ignoring is violence. The judge looked unimpressed. "Being ignored is not justification for escalation," she said. That sentence was my closure. Because that was the exact dynamic in my marriage. Greg believed any boundary was disrespect. So he escalated to regain power. The judge extended the protective order with clear terms for exchange and communication. Third-party exchange for Liam. No contact with my employer. No school appearances outside his scheduled events and only with advance notice. Not forever, but long enough to stabilize. After the hearing, Greg tried to approach me in the hallway. A bailiff stepped between us calmly. Greg's eyes were wet, and for a second I saw the man I married. Then he opened his mouth and said, "You ruined everything." And I knew he still didn't see it. He still believed consequences were something I did to him, not something his actions created. Final update. I filed for divorce 3 months later. Not because I wanted to punish him, because my body stopped trusting him. And I learned something important. Love isn't only a feeling. It's a nervous system decision. I couldn't relax around him anymore. Liam started therapy with a child counselor. The counselor told us something that made me cry in my car afterward. She said, "Kids don't remember the details. They remember whether adults stayed steady." So I stayed steady. We moved into a smaller rental for a while. I kept my job. Marisol never treated me differently at work. If anything, she respected how I handled it. Calm. Documented. No public drama. Greg got supervised exchanges for a period, then moved into standard exchanges once he complied consistently. Our communication moved to a co-parenting app. No calls. No yelling. Just logistics. It wasn't the family picture I wanted, but it was the peace Liam deserved. And here's the part I didn't expect. Ignoring Greg that first day wasn't cowardice. It was the moment I stopped feeding a fire. Because attention is oxygen for people who perform. No reaction, plus receipts, plus boundaries. That's water. If you're listening and someone is trying to control you through embarrassment, I want you to remember this. You don't have to win the argument. You have to protect your life, your work, your kids, your peace. Here's what we learned from this story. First, showing up at someone's home or workplace to confront them isn't bravery. It's escalation. Second, ignoring someone who wants a reaction is often the smartest move. Document instead. Let receipts do the talking. Third, protect kids from adult chaos early. If they start scanning for danger, the damage is already happening. Fourth, boundaries without structure don't hold. HR reports, written rules, third-party exchanges, and calm documentation matter. And finally, if someone keeps saying they're protecting the family while hurting the family, believe the pattern. If you like calm, realistic long story times with receipts, clear timelines, and real closure, subscribe to the channel. That's what we do here.